Hello, and welcome to Iowa's Public Assistance Applicant Briefing presented by Iowa Homeland Security and Emergency Management. If you have questions following this briefing about the Public Assistance Program, please email hsemdrecoverypa@iowa.gov or visit the Public Assistance page on our website at homelandsecurity.gov. FEMA's Public Assistance Program is complex. This briefing is not intended to cover all aspects and requirements, but instead introduce you to the program, the overall process, key requirements, and how to apply. Presidential Disaster Declaration activates the Public Assistance, or PA, grant program, where eligible applicants can apply for federal grant funding with FEMA. The declaration identifies the designated areas, the eligible categories of work, and the key dates, including the deadline to submit a request for public assistance, also referred to as the RPA. You can find the declaration on the Public Assistance page on our website, and you can also find it on FEMA's website by going to fema.gov/disaster and searching for Iowa. The PA program provides federal grants to assist communities to respond to and recover from major disasters and emergencies. Generally, the funding cost share is 75% federal, 10% state, and 15% local. For flood events, the state share is contingent on a county or city's participation in the National Flood Insurance Program. If a county or city is not participating in NFIP, they would be responsible for the full cost share amount of 25%. As we begin, we'd like to highlight a few key resources and references. The Public Assistance Program and Policy Guide is a comprehensive, consolidated program and policy guide. The PAPG includes detailed guidance on program requirements, including applicant, work, facility, and cost eligibility. The current version of the PAPG can be found on FEMA's website. The PA program is authorized and governed by the Stafford Act, and program-specific regulations are found at 44 CFR Part 206. The uniform administrative requirements, cost principles, and audit requirements for federal awards can be found at 2 CFR Part 200. We have a dedicated page on our website for the PA program. There you can find additional resources and information for Iowa's disaster declarations. EM Grants Pro is HSEMD's grants management system. FEMA has a separate system, Grants Portal. You'll start the process by submitting an RPA in our system, EM Grants Pro. Documenting damage, scoping, costing, and final reviews for projects will happen in FEMA system, Grants Portal. Finally, once projects are obligated, managing the grant, including any amendments, reports, and closeout activities, will occur in our system, EM Grants Pro. The first step in the process is to submit a request for public assistance, also referred to as an RPA. For those of you familiar with other grant programs, you can think of this like a notice of interest. The deadline to submit an RPA is 30 days from the date of declaration. The purpose of the RPA is to verify eligibility as a PA applicant in a specific disaster event. Specific impacts, potential work, costs, and their eligibility are reviewed later in the project formulation process after your RPA has been approved. Here in Iowa, you'll submit the RPA in our grant system, EM Grants Pro. If you're new to the system, you'll first need to register as a new user. You can find a full tutorial on how to register and submit an RPA on HSEMD's website. When completing the RPA, you'll need to verify organizational information, such as the legal name, FEIN number, organization type, address, etc. You'll also identify a primary point of contact, an alternate point of contact, and an authorized contact. Your authorized contact should be someone who is authorized to sign legal documents and/or agreements on behalf of your organization. Nonprofits will need to complete an additional questionnaire and may need to provide additional documentation, such as your IRS ruling letter upon submission of your RPA. Are you not sure if you have the right kind of damage or enough damage for the PA program? Our advice is go ahead and submit an RPA. It's extremely important that we receive your RPA prior to the 30-day deadline. If at a later point in the process you identify that the PA program is not the right fit, you can always withdraw. The four basic components of PA eligibility are applicant, facility, work, and costs. FEMA refers to these components as the building blocks of an eligibility pyramid. Each block is evaluated starting at the foundation. An applicant must be a state, territory, tribe, local government, or private nonprofit organization. Only certain PNPs are eligible applicants. To be eligible, PNP must own or operate a facility that provides an eligible service. Chapter 3 of the POPG has additional guidance on eligible, critical, and non-critical essential social services for PNPs. A facility is a building, a system, equipment built or manufactured, or an improved and maintained natural feature. An example is a water distribution system. Mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and other systems that are components of a facility in which they operate are considered part of the facility. To be eligible, a facility must have sustained damage as a direct result of the disaster, be located within a declared area, be the legal responsibility of an eligible applicant, and not be under the authority of another federal agency. Additional guidance on eligible facilities can be found in the POPG Chapter 4. Work is categorized in the program as either emergency or permanent. It must be required as a result of the declared incident located in the designated disaster area and the legal responsibility of the applicant. Emergency work must be completed within 6 months from the declaration date. Permanent work within 18 months. If additional time is needed to complete work, applicants must submit an extension request in writing to HSEMD. Additional guidance on eligibility and requirements for each category of work can be found in the POPG in chapters 7 and 8. Let's take a closer look at emergency work, categories A and B. Emergency work is only eligible if the work addresses an immediate threat. FEMA defines an immediate threat as a threat of imminent danger, additional damage or destruction reasonably expected to occur within 5 years. Category A is for debris removal. The deadline to complete Cat A emergency work is 6 months from the declaration date, unless a time extension has been approved by HSEMD. Debris includes, but is not limited to, vegetative debris, construction and demolition debris, sand, mud, silt, gravel, boulders, white goods, such as appliances or household items, and vehicle or vessel wreckage. Be prepared to provide estimates of debris quantity, photographs, the location of debris, the location of temporary reduction sites and permanent disposal sites, copies of permits, quantities of debris removed, reduced, disposed, and recycled with load tickets, and documentation of legal responsibility and immediate threat. Additional guidance on debris removal can be found in the Poppage in Chapter 7. If you have debris removal needs in your community, it is really important to take a closer look at the specific requirements, eligibility criteria, and documentation requirements outlined in the Poppage. For example, to remove hazardous trees, the tree needs to be 6 inches or greater, measured in diameter at 4.5 feet above from the ground. It must have a split trunk, a broken canopy, or be leaning greater than 30 degrees. Whether or not the root ball is 50% or more exposed will impact if stump removal or grinding is also eligible. Category B is for emergency protective measures. The deadline to complete Cat B emergency work is 6 months from the declaration date, unless a time extension has been approved by HSCMD. Additional guidance on emergency protective measures and specific requirements can be found in the Poppage Chapter 7. Permanent work, categories C through G, is required to restore a facility to its pre-disaster design and function in accordance with applicable codes and standards. An emergency repair or stabilization to eliminate or lessen an immediate threat is emergency work. All permanent work is subject to the eligibility of the facility, as we discussed regarding PA's eligibility pyramid. So, what does this really mean? Let's take a closer look at some definitions and examples. Pre-disaster design means the size or capacity of a facility as originally constructed or subsequently modified. It does not mean the capacity at which the applicant was using the facility at the time of the incident, if different from the most recent design capacity. So, as an example, if a school was designed for a capacity of 100 students and it's damaged beyond repair, the eligible funding for the replacement facility is limited to that necessary for 100 students, even if more than 100 students were attending the school prior to the incident. Pre-disaster function is the function for which the facility was originally designed or subsequently modified. For example, the applicant designed and constructed an administrative building, but later altered it in accordance with applicable construction codes or standards to use as a school. The pre-disaster function would be a school. If the facility was serving as an alternate function at the time of the incident, but was not altered to provide that function, FEMA provides PA funding to restore the facility either to the original pre-disaster function or pre-disaster alternate function, whichever costs less. So, as an example, if an applicant is using an office building as a storage facility at the time of an incident, and it's less costly to restore the facility as a storage facility, only the repairs necessary to restore it as a storage facility will be eligible. Special lighting, wall or floor finishes typical in an office building that are not necessary for a storage facility would be ineligible. Additional guidance on permanent work and each specific category of work can be found in Chapter 8 of the Poppage. Cost is the funding tied directly to eligible work. It must be adequately documented, authorized, necessary, and reasonable. Costs must comply with the Uniform Guidance and Cost Principles located at 2 CFR Part 200. Eligible costs include labor, equipment, materials, contract work, as well as direct and indirect administrative costs. Be prepared to provide documentation to support the costs, including invoices, receipts, proof of payment, documentation to procurement, timesheets, payroll reports, etc., and any applicable policies. Additional guidance on cost eligibility can be found in Chapter 6 of the Poppage. FEMA refers to an applicant's own personnel as force account. FEMA reimburses force account labor based on actual hourly rates, plus the cost of an employee's actual fringe benefits. FEMA's criteria for reimbursing straight-time labor costs differ depending on the type of employee and whether it is emergency work or permanent work. For permanent work, both straight-time and overtime labor costs are eligible for both budgeted and unbudgeted employees. For emergency work, generally, only overtime is eligible for budgeted employees. For unbudgeted employees, straight time and overtime may be eligible. Category A emergency work does have an exception where applicants can elect to participate in the alternative procedures for debris removal and receive reimbursement for straight time and overtime for budgeted employees engaged in debris removal activities. Labor costs must be supported by time and effort reporting for each individual. This documentation should include 100% of the hours worked during the period claimed, not just the hours for your PA projects. It should also delineate time spent on each federal and non-federal activity. You'll need to be prepared to provide payroll documentation along with your payroll and accounting policies. Chapter 6 in the Poppage has additional guidance on force account labor requirements. FEMA provides PA funding for the use of applicant-owned equipment, also known as force account equipment, based on hourly rates. For vehicles, FEMA may provide funding based on mileage if it is documented and less costly than hourly rates. If an applicant does not have sufficient equipment to effectively respond to the event, FEMA may provide funding for both the purchase price and either the use of the equipment based on hourly rates or actual fuel and maintenance costs. However, it is important to note, in accordance with federal regulations regarding disposition, if the equipment is no longer needed for federally funded activities, FEMA may reduce the eligible funding by the equipment's current fair market value. FEMA publishes national equipment rates based on all costs associated with ownership and operation, except for labor, including depreciation, maintenance, etc. If you're not using FEMA's rates, you'll want to be prepared to provide a justification and documentation to support the use of a local or state rate. What about leased equipment? PA funding is then considered based on the terms of the lease. You may need to demonstrate that leasing was more cost-effective than purchase. Additional information on where to find FEMA's most up-to-date rates, the use of state or local rates, and other equipment eligibility and cost requirements can be found in the Poppage in Chapter 6. Now let's talk a bit about procurement. Like everything else, documentation is key. Procurement noncompliance can jeopardize your PA funding. It's extremely important that you take the time to review your written procurement policies and procedures to ensure that they do not conflict with the federal requirements. State government applicants must follow the same policies and procedures they would use for procurements with non-federal funds. They must comply with 2 CFR 200-322, procurement of recovered materials, and ensure that every purchase order or contract includes any clauses required by 2 CFR 200-326 contract provisions. Non-state applicants, tribal and local governments, and PNPs must use their own written procurement procedures that reflect applicable state, tribal, and local governmental laws and regulations, provided that the procurements conform to applicable federal law and standards. The federal procurement requirements are outlined in the 2 CFR Part 200, 317 through 327. Additional resources, guidance, and training can be found on FEMA's website. If you have a conflict between the rules, the general guidance is to follow the more restrictive rule. In an emergency or exigent situation, FEMA may reimburse costs incurred under a contract procured through a non-competitive proposal. This is also known as sole source. Many disaster recovery projects and the work within them funded under the PA program do not meet FEMA's definitions of an emergency or exigency. It is important to document your justification and describe the emergency or exigent circumstance in your procurement records. Let's take a closer look at the definitions and then take a look at some scenarios. Exigency is defined as the existence of a need to avoid, prevent, or alleviate serious harm or injury, financial or otherwise, to the applicant. Emergency is defined as the existence of a threat to life, public health, or safety, or improved property, requiring immediate action to alleviate that threat. So what might these look like? Let's look at these two scenarios. In our first scenario, severe weather impacts a city and causes widespread and catastrophic damage, including loss of life, widespread flooding, loss of power, damage to public and private structures, and millions of cubic yards of debris across the city, leaving almost the entire jurisdiction inaccessible. The city needs to begin debris removal activities immediately to restore access to the community, support search and rescue operations, restore power, and address health and safety concerns. Under these emergency circumstances, the city may find it necessary to award non-competitive contracts due to the emergency situation to address threats to life, improve property, and public health and safety. In our second scenario, a tornado impacts a city in June and causes widespread and catastrophic damage, including damaging a school. The city wants to repair the school by the beginning of the school year in September. Awarding a contract using a sealed bidding process would require at least 90 days. And the repair work would be another 60 days at least, extending the project beyond the beginning of the school year. Rather than conducting a sealed bidding process, the city, in compliance with state and local law, wants to sole source with a contractor it has worked with previously. Here, the city can demonstrate that this is an exigent circumstance because the sealed bidding process would cause an unacceptable delay, affecting and adversely impacting children's education and the city's economy if parents are required to stay at home with children. Thus, procurement by non-competitive methods was necessary. Once, however, the emergency or exigent situation has been resolved, FEMA expects the remainder of the work to be competitively procured. As we discussed earlier, it is extremely important to note that a procurement misstep can jeopardize your PA funding. If you're unsure if your situation meets the definition of emergency or exigent, we strongly encourage you to reach out to your FEMA or state representative for guidance. FEMA is legally prohibited from duplicating benefits from other sources. If an applicant receives funding from another source for the same work, FEMA reduces the eligible cost to prevent a duplication of benefits. FEMA will reduce eligible project costs for facilities that are insured by the actual or anticipated insurance proceeds. If an uninsured facility was damaged by flooding and is located within a special flood hazard area, FEMA will reduce the eligible amount by the maximum amount of insurance proceeds that could have been obtained from a standard NFIP policy or the value of the facility, whichever is less. On permanent work projects, applicants must obtain and maintain reasonable insurance to protect facilities against future loss. This is not required for facilities with less than $5,000 of damage. Additional guidance on the duplication of benefits and insurance can be found in Chapter 6 of the POPG. Category Z, management costs, refers to grant management and administrative costs. It does not refer to project management activities for specific projects such as construction oversight, monitoring contractor work, etc. For subrecipients, FEMA provides PA funding for management costs based on actual costs incurred up to 5% of the subrecipient's total award amount. Examples of work activities may include, but are not limited to, things such as participating in a site inspection, developing the detailed damage descriptions, preparing and submitting reports, requesting PA funds, and more. So, how does this all work? The general life cycle of disaster recovery for the PA program is organized into phases. After a presidential declaration, the state coordinates applicant briefings. Within 30 days of the declaration, interested applicants must submit their request for public assistance in HSCMD's grant system, EM Grants Pro. The state and FEMA then review the RPA to confirm the organization's eligibility as an applicant for the PA program. Once your RPA is approved and your organization has been determined to be an eligible applicant, HSCMD coordinates a pre-award risk assessment. Our staff work with applicants to review agency capacity, policies, and procedures. This includes reviewing written procurement policies and their compliance with federal requirements. The results of the risk assessment informs HSCMD's monitoring activities during the disaster. At this time, HSCMD also initiates the funding agreement, which is completed in EM Grants Pro. Funds for obligated projects cannot be released until the funding agreement is complete. Agreements are required to be electronically signed in EM Grants Pro. Applicants are assigned to a program delivery manager or PDMG by FEMA. Your PDMG will coordinate an exploratory call to gain an initial understanding of impacts and discuss requirements and next steps. The call is usually scheduled within 7 working days of assignment. Within 21 days of assignment, the FEMA PDMG will coordinate a recovery scoping meeting, or RSM. The applicant should ensure staff with knowledge of incident-related damage, emergency activities performed, and related costs attend the meeting. Each applicant will also be assigned a member of our HSCMD Public Assistance Field Delivery Team, who will serve as your state representative during project formulation. Applicants must identify and report all incident-related impacts to FEMA within 60 days of the RSM. To do this, the applicant will prepare and submit a damage inventory. And the project is formulated, information is entered and uploaded and updated into FEMA's system grants portal. FEMA gathers project-specific information by conducting site inspections and obtaining documentation. Damage information is the foundation of the overall project award. The scope of work and cost eligibility is tied to the eligibility of the damage. Once FEMA, HSCMD, and the applicant agree on the damage, description, and dimensions, projects are then scoped and costed. Documentation is reviewed, and once final reviews are completed by FEMA, HSCMD, and the applicant, projects are obligated. All project formulation occurs in FEMA system grants portal. The federal share of the project becomes available at obligation. Once all projects are obligated, the PDMG coordinates a recovery transition meeting, or RTM, to transition the applicant from the project development phase to the subaward management phase. At this time, HSEMD will assign a member of its Grants Management and Monitoring, or GMM team, who will serve as your state representative post-obligation. Any amendment or extension requests must be submitted in writing to HSEMD. Consult with your HSEMD GMM project officer if you have any questions. Ongoing subaward management, such as reporting and closeout, occurs in HSEMD's system, EM Grants Pro. Upon closeout, the state share of project funds become available to be paid out. The damage inventory lays the foundation for all future actions, including project formulation, establishing the damage description and dimensions, or DDD, the scope of work, and all cost estimates, which lead to project obligation. You can download an Excel spreadsheet template for the DI from Grants Portal. The DI is where you will report all of your impacts and damages. Following the exploratory call, the applicant will begin working on the damage inventory. You will bring a draft to your recovery scoping meeting, and a finalized version of the DI must be submitted within 60 days of the RSM. As the PDMG works with the applicant, they identify sites and facilities that can be combined into one project. Generally, things are organized based on categories of work and facility types. Then sites or facilities are identified that should be formulated into separate projects. A project worksheet, or PW, is created for each project. It captures the related disaster damage, facilities, scope of work, and costs. Projects must meet the minimum threshold for eligible costs. FEMA administers funding for large projects and small projects differently. For large projects that are not capped, FEMA adjusts any estimated cost to the actual incurred amount so that the final funding is based on actuals. Small projects are not adjusted for actuals. Here in Iowa, for small projects, the federal share is paid on obligation and the state share on closeout. For large projects, the federal share becomes available at obligation, and an applicant can submit requests for reimbursement throughout the project in our grants management system, EM Grants Pro. After your RPA has been approved, HSEMD initiates the funding agreement in EM Grants Pro. The funding agreement must be signed and completed in order for HSEMD to release funds for approved and obligated projects. On the RPA, you identified key initial contacts, including a primary, alternate, and authorized contact. Here, on the funding agreement, you'll reconfirm the authorized representative and you'll identify a chief financial officer. Checking the boxes to certify each section and submitting the agreement in the system applies an electronic signature. This must be done by either your authorized representative or chief financial officer in the system in order for their signature to be applied. No other signatures will be accepted. So what is an authorized representative? This is a person who is authorized to sign legal documentation and/or agreements on behalf of your organization, such as a mayor, county commission chair, city manager, etc. FEMA has the authority to provide PA funding for cost-effective hazard mitigation measures for facilities damaged by the incident under Section 406 of the Stafford Act. Hazard mitigation is any sustained action taken to reduce or eliminate risk to people and property from natural hazards and their effects. Additional guidance can be found in Chapter 8 of the POPG. If a mitigation activity does not meet the criteria for PA funding, it may be eligible for funding under the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, also known as HMGP. As you engage in next steps to evaluate your damage and plan your project scope, Your FEMA and HSEMD representatives will discuss the potential for hazard mitigation activities with you. FEMA reviews each project to ensure compliance with applicable environmental and historical preservation requirements. Additional information on EHP can be found in the Poppage in Chapters 7 and 8 and Appendix A. Additionally, FEMA publishes a green sheet that provides disaster-specific guidance. Once the green sheet becomes available, HSEMD posts a copy on the PA page on our website. HSEMD also recommends applicants review FEMA Special Consideration Questions, FEMA Form 009-0-12. This form is completed for each PA project and can assist applicants with identifying items related to their project that may require additional EHP review by FEMA. Projects near waterways or floodplains require a cooperative effort between the applicant and the regulatory agency. Additional information on submitting a joint application through DNR's permit website can be found on DNR's website. FEMA requires a response from both DNR and USACE. An applicant may wish to make improvements to a damaged facility that are not required by eligible codes or standards. A project that restores the pre-disaster function of a facility and incorporates improvements or changes to the pre-disaster design is an improved project. When this occurs, the applicant must obtain HSEMD's approval prior to the commencement of work. In some cases, an applicant may determine that the public welfare is not best served by restoring the function of a damaged facility. When this occurs, the applicant must obtain FEMA's approval prior to the commencement of work to apply PA funding toward a different facility or facilities. FEMA refers to this as an alternate project. For more information regarding improved and alternate projects, see Chapter 8 of the Poppage. Alternative procedures for permanent work under Section 428 of the Stafford Act is designed to achieve better recovery outcomes and simplify the delivery of assistance. Applicants have the opportunity to choose this method, but it is not required. FEMA caps federal funding based on the aggregate federal share of the approved estimated cost to restore the damaged facilities to pre-disaster design and function in accordance with eligible codes and standards, and for cost-effective PA mitigation measures associated with the actual restoration scope of work that the applicant will perform. FEMA will prepare a fixed cost estimate for all large permanent work projects and will send a fixed cost offer to the applicant for consideration. If the applicant accepts the offer, FEMA considers it an alternative procedures project. If the offer is not accepted, the project will be processed utilizing standard procedures. Final funding will be based on actual costs. Here in Iowa, we have not had many applicants utilize this option. If you're interested in learning more, we advise you to review the additional guidance in Chapter 8 and Appendix M of the Poppage, and to discuss options with your PDMG and your state representative. PA funding is aimed at restoring facilities based on pre-disaster design and function in conformity with current applicable codes, specifications, and standards. The purpose of incorporating consensus-based codes, specifications, and standards is to promote resiliency and reduce future risk in repair and replacement of damaged facilities funded under the PA program. An applicant may jeopardize funding by not incorporating such codes into its repair or replacement of a facility. FEMA Policy 104-009-11 outlines the framework and requirements. Appendix A of the policy lists specific codes, specifications, and standards by facility type. Additional guidance can be found in the Poppage in Chapter 8. Multiple layers of government work in partnership to administer the PA program after a disaster has been declared. As the federal awarding agency, FEMA's primary responsibilities are to develop and issue program guidance and policies, award the prime PA disaster grant to the state, assist with the development and final approval of projects, and obligate funds. The state of Iowa is the recipient of the prime grant. And as the pass-through entity, HSEMD works in partnership with FEMA to manage and administer the program in Iowa. HSEMD has a dedicated team of public assistance staff. Our staff support the administration of subawards, provide technical assistance, and monitor project progress and compliance. FEMA uses both the term applicant and subrecipient to identify the local partner. An applicant has applied for assistance under PA, while a subrecipient has received a subaward. The grant requirements from the prime award flow down to the subrecipient. Subrecipients are accountable for the compliant use of federal funds and completion of projects in compliance with PA program policy, terms, conditions, and regulations. Documentation must be retained for at least 3 years from closeout. We recommend organizing your documentation as if you were going to be audited. You'll want to establish a disaster-specific file to maintain documentation for each of your PA projects and include all support documentation for claimed costs. The Single Audit Act requires federal grant recipients who expend $750,000 or more in federal funds in a fiscal year to have a single audit performed. Common audit findings include missing or incomplete documentation, ineligible or unreasonable costs, procurement issues, or identifying that funds were commingled and not tracked separately in the accounting system. So the next step in the process is really to submit an RPA through our grants management system, EM Grants Pro. And if you're not sure if you have the right kind of damage or enough damage, that's okay. Go ahead and submit an RPA. If you later identify that the PA program is not the right fit, you can always withdraw. But it's very important that HSEMD receives your RPA prior to the 30-day deadline to consider your eligibility in the program. As we've mentioned throughout the briefing, there are a lot of resources available for applicants. FEMA has a policy page on their website where you can find the Poppage additional policies and fact sheets. They also have a page dedicated to procurement guidance and resources, which include live and on-demand training. We highly recommend all applicants take a look at these. FEMA also has PA-specific training posted on demand on their website. Aside from the PA program, there are a number of additional disaster recovery resources. FEMA's Hazard Mitigation Grant Program provides funding for eligible mitigation measures that reduce disaster losses. HSEMD is also the pass-through entity for the HMGP program in Iowa. FEMA's Community Disaster Loan Program is available to local governments adversely affected by major disasters. Funds can be used to carry on existing essential municipal services or expand such essential functions to meet disaster-related needs. Loans have an initial term of 5 years and can be extended to 10 years. The State of Iowa Contingent Fund is designed to meet disaster-related necessary expenses or serious needs through a loan. Funding cannot exceed $1 million per fiscal year and has a 20-year repayment schedule with no interest. This fund is also administered by HSCMD. For more information on the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, the Community Disaster Loan Program, or the State Contingent Fund, visit our website or contact HSCMD Recovery PA at iowa.gov, and we'll get you in touch with the appropriate contact. The Small Business Administration provides low-interest disaster loans to help businesses and homeowners recover from declared disasters. Additional information on how to apply can be found on SBA's website, www.sba.gov. Through the CDBG DR program, HUD provides flexible grants to help cities, counties, and states to recover from presidentially declared disasters. The Iowa Economic Development Authority is the pass-through agency for the state of Iowa. Additional information can be found on HUD and IEDA's website. The U.S. Department of Labor provides National Dislocated Worker Grants to provide funding to create temporary employment opportunities to assist with cleanup and recovery efforts. Iowa Workforce Development is the pass-through agency for the state of Iowa. Additional information can be found on USDOL and IWD's website. The FHWA Emergency Relief Program helps communities hurt by natural disasters and catastrophic events and provides funding to repair damaged roads and bridges. Generally, this includes interstates, freeways, arterials, and major collector roads. The Iowa Department of Transportation is the pass-through entity for the state of Iowa. On Iowa DOT's website, you can find federal functional classification maps to identify eligible routes. USDA's Farm Service Agency offers a variety of programs to help farmers, communities, and businesses that have been hard hit by natural disasters. Programs include livestock assistance, farm loans, farmland damage, crop loss assistance. Visit farmers.gov to learn more. This concludes our public assistance applicant briefing. If you have additional questions regarding this briefing or the public assistance program, please email us at hscmdrecoverypa@iowa.gov or visit the public assistance page on our website at homelandsecurity.iowa.gov.